translation of Sahih Bukhari, Book 65, Food, Meals. Volume 7, Book 65, number 286, narrated Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, the Prophet said, "Give food to the hungry, pay a visit to the sick and release, set free the one in captivity by paying his ransom." Number 287, narrated Abu Hurairah, the family of Muhammad did not eat their fill for 3 successive days till he died. Number 287I, narrated Abu Hurairah, once while I was in a state of fatigue because of severe hunger, I met Umar bin al-Khattab, so I asked him to recite a verse from Allah's book to me. He entered his house and interpreted it to me. Then I went out, and after walking for a short distance, I fell on my face because of fatigue and severe hunger. Suddenly I saw Allah's apostle standing by my head. He said, "O Abu Hurairah." I replied, "Labbaik, O Allah's apostle," and Sadaik. Then he held me by the hand, and made me get up. Then he came to know what I was suffering from. He took me to his house, and ordered a big bowl of milk for me. I drank thereof, and he said, "Drink more, O Abu Hur." So I drank again, whereupon he again said, "Drink more." So I drank more till my belly became full and looked like a bowl. Afterwards I met Umar and mentioned to him what had happened to me, and said to him, "Somebody, who had more right than you, O Umar, took over the case. By Allah, I asked you to recite a verse to me while I knew it better than you." On that Umar said to me, "By Allah, if I admitted and entertained you, it would have been dearer to me than having nice red camels." Number 288, narrated Umar bin Abi Salama, I was a boy under the care of Allah's apostle, and my hand used to go around the dish while I was eating. So Allah's apostle said to me, "O boy, mention the name of Allah and eat with your right hand, and eat of the dish what is nearer to you." Since then I have applied those instructions when eating. Number 289, narrated Umar bin al-Salama, who was the son of Salama, the wife of the Prophet. Once I ate a meal with Allah's apostle, and I was eating from all sides of the dish. So Allah's apostle said to me, "Eat of the dish what is nearer to you." Number 290, narrated Wahab bin Qais and Abi Nu'aym, a meal was brought to Allah's apostle while his stepson, Umar bin Abi Salama, was with him. Allah's apostle said to him, "Mention the name of Allah and eat of the dish what is nearer to you." Number 291, narrated Anas bin Malik, a tailor invited Allah's apostle to a meal which he had prepared. I went along with Allah's apostle and saw him seeking to eat the pieces of gourd from the various sides of the dish. Since that day I have liked to eat gourd. Umar bin Abi Salama said, "The Prophet said to me, 'Eat with your right hand.'" Number 292, narrated Aisha, the Prophet used to love to start doing things from the right side whenever possible, in performing ablution, putting on his shoes, and combing his hair. Al-Ash'ath said, the Prophet used to do so in all his affairs. Number 293, narrated Anas bin Malik, Abu Talha said to Sulaim, "I have heard the voice of Allah's apostle which was feeble, and I think that he is hungry. Have you got something to eat?" She took out some loaves of barley bread, then took her face-covering sheet and wrapped the bread in part of it, and pushed it under my garment and turned the rest of it around my body and sent me to Allah's apostle. I went with that, and found Allah's apostle in the mosque with some people. I stood up near them, and Allah's apostle asked me, "Have you been sent by Abu Talha?" I said, "Yes." He asked, "With some food for us?" I said, "Yes." Then Allah's apostle said to all those who were with him, "Get up." He set out, and all the people accompanied him, and I proceeded ahead of them till I came to Abu Talha. Abu Talha then said, "O Sulaim, Allah's apostle has arrived along with the people, and we do not have food enough to feed them all." She said, "Allah and his apostle know better." So Abu Talha went out till he met Allah's apostle. Then Abu Talha and Allah's apostle came and entered the house. Allah's apostle said, "Sulaim, bring whatever you have." She brought that very bread. The Prophet ordered that it be crushed into small pieces, and Sulaim pressed a skin of butter on it. Then Allah's apostle said whatever Allah wished him to say to bless the food, and then added, "And admit 10 men." So they were admitted, ate their fill and went out. The Prophet then said, "And admit 10 more." They were admitted, ate their full, and went out. He then again said, "And admit 10 more." They were admitted, ate their fill, and went out. He admitted 10 more, and so all those people ate their fill, and they were 80 men. Number 294, narrated Abdurrahman bin Abu Bakr, "We were 130 men sitting with the Prophet. The Prophet said, 'Have any one of you any food with him?' It happened that one man had 1 saw of wheat flour or so, which was turned into dough. Then, after a while, a tall lanky pagan came, driving some sheep. The Prophet asked, 'Will you sell us a sheep, or give it to us as a gift?' The pagan said, 'No, but I will sell it.' So the Prophet bought from him a sheep which was slaughtered, and then the Prophet ordered that the liver, the kidneys, lungs and heart, etc., of that sheep be roasted. By Allah, none of those 130 men but had his share of those things. The Prophet gave to those who were present, and also kept a share for those who were absent. He then served that cooked sheep in 2 big trays, and we all ate together our fill. Yet there remained a part of it in those 2 trays which I carried on the camel." Number 295, narrated Aisha, "The Prophet died when we had satisfied our hunger with the 2 black things, that is dates and water." Number 296, narrated Suwaid bin Nu'man, "We went out with Allah's apostle to Khaybar, and when we were at As-Saba, Yahya, a sub-narrator, said, 'As-Saba is a place at a distance of 1 day's journey to Khaybar.' Allah's apostle asked the people to bring their food, but there was nothing with the people except sawik. So we all chewed and ate of it. Then the Prophet asked for some water, and he rinsed his mouth, and we too rinsed our mouths. Then he led us in the Maghrib prayer without performing ablution again." Number 297, narrated Qatada, "We were in the company of Anas, whose baker was with him. Anas said, 'The Prophet did not eat thin bread, or a roasted sheep till he met Allah, died.'" Number 298, narrated Anas, "To the best of my knowledge, the Prophet did not take his meals in a big tray at all, nor did he ever eat well-baked thin bread, nor did he ever eat at a dining table." Number 299, narrated Anas, "The Prophet halted to consummate his marriage with Safiya. I invited the Muslims to his wedding banquet. He ordered that leather dining sheets be spread. Then dates, dried yogurt and butter were put on those sheets." Anas added, "The Prophet consummated his marriage with Safiya during a journey, whereupon Harry's sweet dish was served on a leather dining sheet." Number 300, narrated Wahab bin Kaysan, "The people of Sham taunted Abdullah bin Zubair by calling him the son of Datan Natakin. The woman who has 2 waist belts, his mother Esma, said to him, 'O my son, they taunt you with Natakin. Do you know what the Natakin were? That was my waist belt, which I divided in 2 parts. I tied the water skin of Allah's apostle with 1 part, and with the other part I tied his food container." Number 301, narrated Ibn Abbas, that his aunt, Hufayd bin al-Harith bin Hazan, presented to the Prophet butter, dried yogurt and mastigers. The Prophet invited the people to those mastigers, and they were eaten on his dining sheet, but the Prophet did not eat of it, as if he disliked it. Nevertheless, if it was unlawful to eat that, the people would not have eaten it on the dining sheet of the Prophet, nor would he have ordered that they be eaten. Number 302, narrated Suwaid bin Nu'man, that while they were with the Prophet at As-Saba, which was at a distance of 1 day's journey from Khaybar, the prayer became due, and the Prophet asked the people for food, but there was nothing with the people except sawik. He ate of it, and we ate along with him, and then he asked for water and rinsed his mouth with it, and then offered the Maghrib prayer, and we too offered the prayer, but the Prophet did not perform ablution again after eating the sawik." Number 303, narrated Khalid bin al-Walid, that he went with Allah's apostle to the house of Maimuna, who was Azan ibn Abbas' aunt. He found with her a roasted mastigur which her sister Hufada bint al-Harith had brought from Najd. Maimuna presented the mastigur before Allah's apostle, who rarely started eating any unfamiliar food before it was described and named for him. But that time Allah's apostle stretched his hand towards the meat of the mastigur, whereupon a lady from among those who were present, said, "You should inform Allah's apostle of what you have presented to him." O Allah's apostle, it is the meat of a mastigier. On learning that, Allah's apostle withdrew his hand from the meat of the mastigier. Khalid bin al-Walid said, "O Allah's apostle, is this unlawful to eat?" Allah's apostle replied, "No, but it is not found in the land of my people, so I do not like it." Khalid said, "Then I pulled the mastigier meat towards me and ate it while Allah's apostle was looking at me." Number 304, narrated Abu Hurairah, Allah's apostle said, "The food for 2 persons is sufficient for 3, and the food of 3 persons is sufficient for 4 persons." Number 305, narrated Nafi ibn Umar never used to take his meal unless a poor man was called to eat with him. One day I brought a poor man to eat with him. The man ate too much, whereupon Ibn Umar said, "O Nafi, don't let this man enter my house, for I heard the Prophet saying, a believer eats in one intestine is satisfied with a little food, and a kafir and believer eats in 7 intestines eats much food." Number 306, narrated Ibn Umar, Allah's apostle said, "A believer eats in one intestine is satisfied with a little food, and a kafir and believer or a hypocrite eats in 7 intestines eats too much." Number 307, narrated Amr, Abu Nahik was avaricious eater. Ibn Umar said to him, Allah's apostle said, "A kafir and believer eats in 7 intestines eats much." On that Abu Nahik said, "But I believe in Allah and his apostle." Number 308, narrated Abu Hurairah, Allah's apostle said, "A Muslim eats in one intestine, that is, he is satisfied with a little food, while a kafir and believer eats in 7 intestines eats much." Number 309, narrated Abu Hurairah, a man used to eat much, but when he embraced Islam, he started eating less. That was mentioned to the Prophet, who then said, "A believer eats in one intestine is satisfied with a little food, and a kafir eats in 7 intestines eats much." Number 310, narrated Abu Juhayfa, Allah's apostle said, "I do not take my meals while leaning against something." Number 311, narrated Abu Juhayfa, while I was with the Prophet he said to a man who was with him, "I do not take my meals while leaning." Number 312, narrated Khalid bin al-Walid, a roasted mastigier was brought to the Prophet, who stretched his hand towards it to eat it. But it was said to him, "It is a mastigier." So he withdrew his hand. Khalid asked, "Is it unlawful to eat?" The Prophet said, "No, but it is not found in the land of my people, and that is why I do not like eating it." So Khalid started eating it while Allah's apostle was looking at him. And Nadar said, "Al-Khazira is prepared from bran while Al-Harira is prepared from milk." Number 313, narrated Urban bin Malik, who attended the Badr battle and was from the Ansar, that he came to the Prophet and said, "O Allah's apostle, I have lost my eyesight and I lead my people in the prayer as an imam. When it rains, the valley which is between me and my people flows with water, and then I cannot go to their mosque to lead them in the prayer. O Allah's apostle, I wish that you could come and pray in my house so that I may take it as a praying place." The Prophet said, "Allah willing, I will do that." The next morning, soon after the sun had risen, Allah's apostle came with Abu Bakr. The Prophet asked for the permission to enter and I admitted him. The Prophet had not sat till he had entered the house and said to me, "Where do you like me to pray in your house?" I pointed at a place in my house, whereupon he stood and said, "Allahu Akbar." We lined behind him and he prayed 2 rakat and finished it with taslim. We then requested him to stay for a special meal of khazira which we had prepared. A large number of men from the adjoining area gathered in the house. One of them said, "Where is Malik bin Adukshun?" Another man said, "He is a hypocrite and does not love Allah and his apostle." The Prophet said, "Do not say so. Do you not think that he has said none has the right to be worshipped but Allah, seeking Allah's pleasure?" The man said, "Allah and his apostle know better, but we have always seen them mixing with hypocrites and giving them advice." The Prophet said, "Allah has forbidden the hellfire for those who testify that none has the right to be worshipped but Allah, seeking Allah's pleasure." Number 314, narrated Ibn Abbas, my aunt presented roasted mastigiers, ikat and milk to the Prophet. The mastigiers were put on his dining sheet, and if it was unlawful to eat, it would not have been put there. The Prophet drank the milk and ate the ikat only. Number 315, narrated Sahih bin Sa'd, we used to be happy on Fridays, for there was an old lady who used to pull out the roots of silk and put it in a cooking pot with some barley. When we had finished the prayer, we would visit her and she would present that dish before us. So we used to be happy on Fridays because of that, and we never used to take our meals or have a midday nap except after the Friday prayer. By Allah, that meal contained no fat. Number 316, narrated Ibn Abbas, the Prophet ate of the meat of a shoulder by cutting the meat with his teeth, and then got up and offered the prayer without performing the ablution anew. Narrated Ibn Abbas, the Prophet took out a bone with meat on it from a cooking pot and ate of it, and then offered the prayer without performing ablution anew. Number 317, narrated Abu Qatada, we went out towards Mecca with the Prophet. Number 318, narrated Abu Qatada, once, while I was sitting with the companions of the Prophet at a station on the road to Mecca and Allah's Apostle was stationing ahead of us and all the people were assuming ihram while I was not. My companion saw an onager while I was busy mending my shoes. They did not inform me of the onager but they wished that I would see it. Suddenly I looked and saw the onager, then I headed towards my horse, saddled it and rode, but I forgot to take the lash and the spear. So I said to my companions, give me the lash and the spear. But they said, no, by Allah we will not help you in any way to hunt it. I got angry, dismounted, took it the spear and the lash, rode the horse, chased the onager and wounded it, then I brought it when it had died. My companions started eating of its cooked meat, but they suspected that it might be unlawful to eat of its meat while they were in a state of ihram. Then I proceeded further and I kept one of its forelegs with me. When we met Allah's Apostle we asked him about that. He said, have you some of its meat with you? I gave him that foreleg and he ate the meat till he stripped the bone of its flesh although he was in a state of ihram. Number 319, narrated Amr bin Umayyah, that he saw the Prophet holding a shoulder piece of mutton in his hand and cutting part of it with a knife. Then he was called for the prayer, whereupon he put down the shoulder piece and the knife with which he was cutting it, and then stood for prayer without performing ablution again. Number 320, narrated Abu Hurairah, the Prophet never criticized any food he was invited to, but he used to eat if he liked the food, and leave it if he disliked. Number 321, narrated Abu Hazim, that he asked Sahal, did you use white flour during the lifetime of the Prophet? Sahal replied, no. Hazim asked, did you use to sift barley flour? He said, no, but we used to blow off the husk of the barley. Number 322, narrated Abu Hurairah, once the Prophet distributed dates among his companions and gave each one 7 dates. He gave me 7 dates too, one of which was dry and hard, but none of the other dates was more liked by me than that one, for it prolonged my chewing it. Number 323, narrated Sa'd, I was one of the first 7 who had embraced Islam with Allah's Apostle, and we had nothing to eat then, except the leaves of the hubala or hubula tree, so that our stool used to be similar to that of sheep. Now the tribe of Bani Asad wants to teach me Islam. I would be a loser and all my efforts would be in vain if I learn Islam anew from them. Number 324, narrated Abu Hazim, I asked Sahal bin Sa'd, did Allah's Apostle ever eat white flour? Sahal said, Allah's Apostle never saw white flour since Allah sent him as an apostle till he took him unto him. I asked, did the people have used sieves during the lifetime of Allah's Apostle? Sahal said, Allah's Apostle never saw used a sieve since Allah sent him as an apostle until he took him unto him. I said, how could you eat barley unsifted? He said, we used to grind it and then blow off its husk, and after the husk flew away, we used to prepare the dough, bake and eat it. Number 325, narrated Abu Hurairah, that he passed by a group of people in front of whom there was a roasted sheep. They invited him but he refused to eat and said, Allah's Apostle left this world without satisfying his hunger even with barley bread. Number 326, narrated Anas bin Malik, the Prophet never took his meals at a dining table, nor in small plates, and he never ate thin well-baked bread. The sub-narrator asked Qatada, over what did they use to take their meals? Qatada said, on leather dining sheets. Number 327, narrated Aisha, the family of Muhammad had not eaten wheat bread to their satisfaction for 3 consecutive days since his arrival at Medina till he died. Number 328, narrated Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, that whenever one of her relatives died, the women assembled and then dispersed returned to their houses except her relatives and close friends. She would order that a pot of talbina be cooked. Then tharid, a dish prepared from meat and bread, would be prepared and the talbina would be poured on it. Aisha would say to the women, "Eat of it, for I heard Allah's Apostle saying, the talbina soothes the heart of the patient and relieves him from some of his sadness." Number 329, narrated Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, the Prophet said, many men reached perfection but none among the women reached perfection except Mary, the daughter of Imran, in Asia, Pharaoh's wife. And the superiority of Aisha to other women is like the superiority of tharid to other kinds of food. Number 330, narrated Anas, the Prophet said, the superiority of Aisha to other women is like the superiority of tharid to other kinds of food. Number 331, narrated Anas, I went along with the Prophet to the house of a young tailor of his. The tailor presented a dish of tharid to the Prophet and resumed his work. The Prophet started picking the pieces of gourd and I too started picking them and putting it before him. Since then I have always loved to eat gourd. Number 332, narrated Qatada, we used to visit Anas bin Malik while his baker was standing and baking. Anas would say, "Eat." I do not know that the Prophet had ever seen well-baked bread till he met Allah, nor had he ever seen a roasted sheep with his own eyes. Number 333, narrated Amr bin Umayyah ad-Damri, I saw Allah's Apostle cutting part of the shoulder of mutton with a knife. He ate of it and then was called for prayer, whereupon he got up and put down the knife and offered the prayer without performing new ablution. Number 334, narrated Abbas, I asked Aisha, did the Prophet forbid eating the meat of sacrifices offered on Eid al-Adha for more than 3 days? She said, the Prophet did not do this except in the year when the people were hungry, so he wanted the rich to feed the poor. But later we used to store even a trotter of a sheep to eat it 15 days later. She was asked, what compelled you to do so? She smiled and said, the family of Muhammad did not eat to their satisfaction white bread with meat soup for 3 successive days till he met Allah. Number 335, narrated Jabir, we used to carry the meat of the hadith, that is sacrificed animals, to Medina during the lifetime of the Prophet. Number 336, narrated Anas bin Malik, Allah's Apostle said to Abu Talha, seek one of your boys to serve me. Abu Talha mounted me behind him on his riding animal and took me to the Prophet, so I used to serve Allah's Apostle whenever he dismounted to say somewhere. I used to hear him saying very often, O Allah, I seek refuge with you from having worry, sadness, helplessness, laziness, miserliness, cowardice, from being heavily in debt and from being overpowered by other persons unjustly. I kept on serving till we returned from the Battle of Khaybar. The Prophet then brought Safiya bint Huyay, whom he had won from the war booty. I saw him folding up a gown or a garment for her to sit on behind him on a she-camel. When he reached As-Saba, he prepared haris and placed it on a dining sheet. Then he sent me to invite men, who came and ate. And that was his and Safiya's wedding banquet. Then the Prophet proceeded, and when he noticed the mountain of Uhud, he said, this mountain loves us, and we love it. When we approached Medina, he said, O Allah, I make the area between its 2 mountains a sanctuary as Abraham has made Mecca a sanctuary. O Allah, bless their mud and saw special kinds of measure. Number 337, narrated Abdurrahman bin Abi Layla, we were sitting in the company of Hudayfa, who asked for water, and a Magian brought him water. But when he placed a cup in his hand, he threw it at him and said, had I not forbidden him to do so more than once or twice? He wanted to say, I would not have done so, adding, but I heard the Prophet saying, do not wear silk or dibija, and do not drink in silver or golden vessels, and do not eat in plates of such metals, for such things are for the unbelievers in this worldly life and for us in the hereafter. Number 338, narrated Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, Allah's Apostle said, The example of a believer who recites the Quran is that of a citron which smells good and tastes good, and the example of a believer who does not recite the Quran is that of a date which has no smell but tastes sweet. And the example of a hypocrite who recites the Quran is that of an aromatic plant which smells good but tastes bitter. And the example of a hypocrite who does not recite the Quran is that of a colocynth plant which has no smell and is bitter in taste. Number 339, narrated Anas, the Prophet said, "The superiority of Aisha to other ladies is like the superiority of tharid to other kinds of food." Number 340, narrated Abu Hurairah, the Prophet said, "Traveling is a kind of torture, as it prevents one from sleeping and eating. So when one has finished his job, he should return quickly to his family." Number 341, narrated Qasim bin Muhammad, "Three traditions have been established because of Barira. Aisha intended to buy her and set her free, but Barira's master says, 'Her wallah will be for us.'" Aisha mentioned that to Allah's apostle, who said, "You could accept their condition if you wished, for the wallah is for the one who manumits the slave." Barira was manumitted, then she was given the choice either to stay with her husband or leave him. One day Allah's apostle entered Aisha's house while there was a cooking pot of food boiling on the fire. The Prophet asked for lunch, and he was presented with bread and some extra food from the homemade item, for example soup. He asked, "Don't I see meat being cooked?" They said, "Yes, O Allah's apostle. But it is the meat that has been given to Barira in charity, and she has given it to us as a present." He said, "For Barira it is alms, but for us it is a present." Number 342, narrated Aisha, Allah's apostle used to love sweet edible things and honey. Number 343, narrated Abu Hurairah, "I used to accompany Allah's apostle to fill my stomach. And that was when I did not eat baked bread, nor wear silk. Neither a male nor a female slave used to serve me, and I used to bind stones over my belly and ask somebody to recite a Quranic verse for me though I knew it, so that he might take me to his house and feed me. Ja'far bin Abi Talib was very kind to the poor, and he used to take us and feed us with whatever was available in his house, and if nothing was available, he used to give us the empty honey or butter skin which we would tear and lick whatever was in it." Number 344, narrated Anas, Allah's apostle went to the house of his slave tailor, and he was offered a dish of gourd of which he started eating. "I have loved to eat gourd since I saw Allah's apostle eating it." Number 345, narrated Abu Mas'ud al-Ansari, "There was a man called Abu Shu'ab, and he had a slave who was a butcher. He said to his slave, 'Prepare a meal to which I may invite Allah's apostle along with 4 other men.' So he invited Allah's apostle and 4 other men, but another man followed them, whereupon the Prophet said, 'You have invited me as one of 5 guests, but now another man has followed us. If you wish you can admit him, and if you wish you can refuse him.' On that the host said, 'But I admit him.'" Narrated Muhammad bin Ismail, "If guests are sitting at a dining table, they do not have the right to carry food from other tables to theirs, but they can pass on food from their own table to each other. Otherwise they should leave it." Number 346, narrated Anas, "I was a young boy when I once was walking with Allah's apostle. Allah's apostle entered the house of his slave tailor, and the latter brought a dish filled with food covered with pieces of gourd. Allah's apostle started picking and eating the gourd. When I saw that, I started collecting and placing the gourd before him. Then the slave returned to his work." Anas added, "I have kept on loving gourd since I saw Allah's apostle doing what he was doing." Number 347, narrated Anas bin Malik, "A tailor invited the Prophet to a meal which he had prepared, and I went along with the Prophet. The tailor presented barley bread and soup containing gourd and cured meat. I saw the Prophet picking the pieces of gourd from around the dish, and since then I have kept on liking gourd." Number 348, narrated Anas, "I saw the Prophet being served with soup and containing gourd and cured meat, and I saw him picking and eating the pieces of gourd." Number 349, narrated Aisha, "The Prophet did not do that, that is, forbade the storage of the meat of sacrifices for 3 days, except he did so that the rich would feed the poor, but later we used to keep even trotters to cook, 15 days later." the family of Muhammad did not eat wheat bread with meat or soup to their satisfaction for 3 successive days. Number 350, narrated Anas bin Malik, a tailor invited Allah's Apostle to a meal which he had prepared. I went with Allah's Apostle to that meal, and the tailor served the Prophet with barley bread and soup of gourd and cured meat. I saw Allah's Apostle picking the pieces of gourd from around the dish, and since then I have kept on liking gourd. Number 351, narrated Abdullah bin Ja'far bin Abi Talib, I saw Allah's Apostle eating fresh dates with snake cucumber. Number 352, narrated Abu Uthman, I was a guest of Abu Hurairah for 7 days. Abu Hurairah, his wife and his slave used to get up and remain awake for 1/3 of the night by turns. Each would offer the night prayer and then awaken the other. I heard Abu Hurairah saying, Allah's Apostle distributed dates among his companions and my share was 7 dates, one of which was a hasrafa, a date which dried on the tree before it was fully ripe. Number 353, narrated Abu Hurairah, the Prophet distributed dates among us, and my share was 5 dates, 4 of which were good, and 1 was a hasrafa, and I found the hasrafa the hardest for my teeth. Number 354, narrated Jabir bin Abdullah, there was a Jew in Medina who used to lend me money up to the season of plucking dates. Jabir had a piece of land which was on the way to Ruma. That year the land was not promising, so the payment of the debt was delayed 1 year. The Jew came to me at the time of plucking, but gathered nothing from my land. I asked him to give me 1 year respite, but he refused. This news reached the Prophet, whereupon he said to his companions, let us go and ask the Jew for respite for Jabir. All of them came to me in my garden, and the Prophet started speaking to the Jew, but he Jew said, O Abu Qasim, I will not grant him respite. When the Prophet saw the Jew's attitude, he stood up and walked all around the garden and came again and talked to the Jew, but the Jew refused his request. I got up and brought some ripe fresh dates and put it in front of the Prophet. He ate and then said to me, where is your hut, O Jabir? I informed him, and he said, spread out a bed for me in it. I spread out a bed, and he entered and slept. When he woke up, I brought some dates to him again and he ate of it and then got up and talked to the Jew again, but the Jew again refused his request. Then the Prophet got up for the second time amidst the palm trees loaded with fresh dates, and said, O Jabir, pluck dates to repay your debt. The Jew remained with me while I was plucking the dates, till I paid him all as right, yet there remained extra quantity of dates. So I went out and proceeded till I reached the Prophet and informed him of the good news, whereupon he said, I testify that I am Allah's Apostle. Number 355, narrated Abdullah bin Umar, while we were sitting with the Prophet a spadix of palm tree was brought to him. The Prophet said, there is a tree among the trees which is as blessed as a Muslim. I thought that it was the date palm tree and intended to say, it is the date palm tree, O Allah's Apostle. But I looked behind to see that I was the 10th and youngest of 10 men present there, so I kept quiet. Then the Prophet said, it is the date palm tree. Number 356, narrated Sa'd, Allah's Apostle said, he who eats 7 ajwa dates every morning, will not be affected by poison or magic on the day he eats them. Number 357, narrated Jabala bin Suhaim, at the time of Ibn Zubair, we were struck with famine, and he provided us with dates for our food. Abdullah bin Umar used to pass by us while we were eating, and say, do not eat 2 dates together at a time, for the Prophet forbade the taking of 2 dates together at a time in a gathering. Ibn Umar used to add, unless one takes the permission of one's companions. Number 358, narrated Abdullah bin Ja'far, I saw the Prophet eating fresh dates with snake cucumbers. Number 359, narrated Ibn Umar, the Prophet said, there is a tree among the trees which is similar to a Muslim in goodness, and that is the date palm tree. Number 360, narrated Abdullah bin Ja'far, I saw Allah's Apostle eating fresh dates with snake cucumbers. Number 361, narrated Anas, my mother, Sulaim, took a mud of barley grain, ground it and made porridge from it, and pressed over it a butter skin she had with her. Then she sent me to the Prophet, and I reached him while he was sitting with his companions. I invited him, whereupon he said, and those who are with me? I returned and said, he says, and those who are with me? Abu Talha went out to him and said, O Allah's Apostle, it is just a meal prepared by Sulaim. The Prophet entered and the food was brought to him. He said, let 10 persons enter upon me. Those 10 entered and ate their fill. Again he said, let 10 more enter upon me. Those 10 entered and ate their fill. Then he said, let 10 more enter upon me. He called 40 persons in all. Then Allah's Apostle ate and got up. I started looking at the food to see if it decreased or not. Number 362, narrated Abdulaziz, it was said to Anas, what did you hear the Prophet saying about garlic? Anas replied, whoever has eaten garlic should not approach our mosque. Number 363, narrated Jabir bin Abdullah, the Prophet said, whoever has eaten garlic or onion should keep away from us or should keep away from our mosque. Number 364, narrated Jabir bin Abdullah, we were with Allah's Apostle collecting al-kabath and marazaran. The Prophet said, collect the black ones, for they are better. Somebody said, O Allah's Apostle, have you ever shepherded sheep? He said, there has been no prophet but has shepherded them. Number 365, narrated Suwaid bin Numan, we went out with Allah's Apostle to Khaybar, and when we reached As-Saba, the Prophet asked for food, and he was offered nothing but sawik. We ate, and then Allah's Apostle stood up for the prayer. He rinsed his mouth with water, and we too rinsed our mouths. Narrated Suwaid. We went out with Allah's Apostle to Khaybar, and when we reached As-Saba, which Yahya says is 1-day journey from Khaybar, the Prophet asked for food, and he was offered nothing but sawik, which we chewed and ate. Then the Prophet asked for water and rinsed his mouth, and we too rinsed our mouths along with him. He then led us in the Maghrib prayer without performing ablution again. Number 366, narrated Ibn Abbas, the Prophet said, when you eat, do not wipe your hands till you have licked it, or had it licked by somebody else. Number 367, narrated Said bin al-Harith, that he asked Jabir bin Abdullah about performing ablution after taking a cooked meal. He replied, it is not essential, and added, we never used to get such kind of food during the lifetime of the Prophet except rarely. And if at all we got such a dish, we did not have any handkerchiefs to wipe our hands with except the palms of our hands, our forearms and our feet. We would perform the prayer thereafter without performing new ablution. Number 368, narrated Abu Umama, whenever the dining sheet of the Prophet was taken away, that is, whenever he finished his meal, he used to say, Alhamdulillah kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fihi ghayra makfi'i wala muwada wala mustaghilahu rabbuna. Number 369, narrated Abu Umama, whenever the Prophet finished his meals or when his dining sheet was taken away, he used to say, praise be to Allah who has satisfied our needs and quenched our thirst. Your favor cannot be compensated or denied. Once he said, praise be to you, O our Lord. Your favor cannot be compensated, nor can be left, nor can be dispensed with, O our Lord. Number 370, narrated Abu Hurairah, the Prophet said, when your servant brings your food to you, if you do not ask him to join you, then at least ask him to take 1 or 2 handfuls, for he has suffered from its heat while cooking it and has taken pains to cook it nicely. Number 371, narrated Abu Mas'ud al-Ansari, there was an Ansari man nicknamed Abu Shu'ab, who had a slave who was a butcher. He came to the Prophet while he was sitting with his companions and noticed the signs of hunger on the face of the Prophet, so he went to his butcher slave and said, prepare for me a meal sufficient for 5 persons so that I may invite the Prophet along with 4 other men. He had the meal prepared for him and invited him. A 6th man followed them. The Prophet said, O Abu Shu'ab, another man has followed us. If you wish, you may invite him. And if you wish, you may refuse him. Abu Shu'ab said, no, I will admit him. Number 372, narrated Amr bin Umayyah, that he saw Allah's Apostle cutting a piece of mutton from its shoulder part he was carrying in his hand. When he was called for prayer, he put it down and the knife with which he was cutting it. Then he stood up and offered the prayer without performing new ablution. Number 373 narrated Anas bin Malik, the Prophet said, if supper is served and the Iqamah for Isha prayer is proclaimed, start with you supper first. Number 373 narrated Nafi, once Ibn Umar was taking his supper while he was listening to the recitation of Quran by the Imam in the Isha prayer. Number 374 narrated Aisha, the Prophet said, if the Iqamah for Isha prayer is proclaimed and supper is served, take your supper first. Number 375 narrated Anas, I know about the hijab, the order of veiling of women, more than anybody else. Ubay bin Ka'b used to ask me about it. Allah's apostle became the bridegroom of Zainab bint Jahsh, whom he married at Medina. After the sun had risen high in the sky, the Prophet invited the people to a meal. Allah's apostle remained sitting and some people remained sitting with him after the other guests had left. Then Allah's apostle got up and went away, and I too followed him till he reached the door of Aisha's room. Then he thought that the people must have left the place by then, so he returned and I also returned with him. Behold, the people were still sitting at their places. So he went back again for the second time, and I went along with him too. When we reached the door of Aisha's room, he returned and I also returned with him to see that the people had left. Thereupon the Prophet hung a curtain between me and him, and the verse regarding the order for veiling of women hijab was revealed.